Ethiopia vows to deepen reforms in the face of new challenges. And at least 100 killed as floods hit the Democratic Republic of Congo capital, Kinshasa. Good morning, you're watching Addis News Hour. I'm Zoltan Desani. Thank you for joining us and do stay tuned. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed held fruitful discussions on Wednesday with Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, on the sidelines of the ongoing U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. The two dwelt at length on Ethiopia's transformative economic reform agenda, and the premier confirmed on social media that they also exchanged views about the need for debt resolutions. During the discussion, Prime Minister Abiy expressed Ethiopia's resolve to preserve past gains, and he also explained the government's commitment to further deepen his country's economic reform. Meanwhile, saying that the return of peace is a chance to accelerate economic transformation agenda, Prime Minister Abiy wrote on his social media page that he had discussions with President of the World Bank Group, David Malpass, on supporting reforms. In another development, in the first ever in-person meeting held between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the two discussed the urgent need for the swifter implementation of the permanent cessation of hostilities agreement reached between the federal government and the TPLF back in November. Secretary Blinken commended steps taken by the Ethiopian government to improve humanitarian access and begin restoration of essential services. Meanwhile, an Ethiopian diplomat who attended the meeting, which was held in the sidelines of the U.S.-Africa Summit, told ETV that Ethiopia's re-engagement with the West is bearing fruits. Tegusa Nisa takes it from here.
The much-awaited U.S.-Africa Summit kicked off on Tuesday in Washington, D.C. Its topic menu ranging from climate adaptation and energy transition to peace, security and governance. During his stay in the U.S. capital, D.C., Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed used the occasion to thrash out pertinent issues with Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the implementation of the Pretoria Agreement.
Secretary Blinken was briefed on how the ongoing reform for the past 4 years in Ethiopia has been life-changing to the general public. The two also delved into the issue of how to scale up bilateral ties. Also in the agenda was the accelerated implementation of the peace accord, which includes the disarmament of Tigrayan forces and the resumption of services, which is well underway.
Similarly, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed held a constructive discussion with the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan over a host of issues, including on the cementing ties of bilateral relationships of the two countries.
At the strategic level, there was an exchange of ideas about what the relationship between the two countries should be, where it should go from here, and what form it should take. The age-long bilateral ties have witnessed a fair share of triumph and untapped potentials.
For decades, Ethiopia has been a key ally of the U.S. in Africa. The two discussed ways of strengthening partnership, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed added. The U.S. stated its repeated stand that it remains committed to supporting the African Union-led peace process, including the AU monitoring the verification mechanism of the peace agreement.
You're watching Addis News Hour as we have arrived to the segment of What's Been Trending, and I'm joined by our staff member, Daniel Kassan. Good morning.
Good morning.
So as we have to cut to the chase, Daniel, I think we need to address about with regards to the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit taking place in Washington, D.C. from December 13th to the 15th of 2022, which of course we'll have to deal with Prime Minister Abiy's engagement in this meeting as well. And of course, Prime Minister Abiy's engagement with the sidelines that he had with the sidelines events with various African leaders and the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and along with, of course, witnessing the match between France and Morocco, of course, with the 22nd edition of the FIFA World Tournament at Qatar.
Right. The US Africa Leader Summit is a very extraordinary summit which is happening in Washington, D.C., and it concludes today. There was China-Africa partnership, and this is, I think, against China-Africa partnership, and the United States wants to have the leadership role all over the world, including in Africa. It doesn't want anybody to take the driver's seat and to steer the wheels of the world, so that the Biden administration is hosting almost all leaders of the continent. And fortunately, our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, is there, and he had a nice time there, beginning from receiving the award. And fortunately, this session, Ethiopia is fortunate enough to have this session at this critical time in which it's found, after the peace deal. And after many things are taking shape now here in the country. And this is opportune time for Ethiopia to explain everything about this country to the outside world, having all the leaders of the continent at a time in a given places, a great venue for the Prime Minister to express himself and to sell the image of Ethiopia and to explain everything about what was going on in this country. And everybody is expecting the outcome of the peace deal, so that it is a great time for Ethiopia to be there. And I think the Prime Minister will explain everything about the development efforts happening in this country and his reform program in this country. And there was disagreement between this government and the United States government in connection to the conflict in the Tigray region. So this has to be explained well to the Biden administration, and hopefully they have revoked the AGOA trade deal between Ethiopia and the United States due to the conflict, and that has to be reinstated. And if he explains this well to the Biden administration, I expect it will be reinstated and everything will be right. So far it has affected this country. The investment opportunity of this country has been severely affected by when AGOA was revoked, because many companies were trading using that opportunity, tariff-free opportunity, exporting their products to the United States. And I expect that to be told recently. Today, the Biden administration will make his concluding remarks, and I expect many things for Africa will be in a good shape. But we shouldn't see things business as usual. The previous relationship between the United States and Africa is almost the United States takes the driver's seat and steers the wheel wherever, in every direction it wants to. Mm-hmm. That has to be controlled, and that has to be reshaped. And I don't think they will be submissive as the previous times to the Biden administration. With regard to Ethiopia, Ethiopia advocates a win-win approach in its foreign relationship to any country. So the relationship between Africa and the United States has to be changed a bit, and it has to be in a balanced manner. It shouldn't be let others to lead, to take the driver's seat and to steer the wheels as they want. So this will be normalized, I hope. And the Biden administration will be a bit flexible. It has to be a bit flexible in its relationship with Africa. Last time there was an high-level forum in Bahir Dar, and Mike Hammer, U.S. Special Envoy of the Horn of Africa, has told the gathering that they have geopolitical interest in the Horn of Africa. They have geopolitical interest and other interests in the African continent. But maintaining that interest shouldn't be at the expense of the people of Africa. The leaders has to explain everything to the Biden administration, and they have to readjust the relationship with Africa. I expect this. And we mentioned that the two had discussion. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Joe Biden had discussion, and that discussion is already, I've mentioned it, and the soccer happened yesterday between France and Morocco, and that's very interesting, but I don't think it's a critical matter for
the topic of discussion.
The relationship. And I expect today it's said that the Biden administration dedicates a high-level discussion among the leadership of Africa. There were around 300 companies from all over the mentioned countries, and hopefully they will discuss about Agenda 2063 and about the Sustainable Development Goals. All are intertwined, interrelated. Agenda 2063 of the African Union and the Sustainable Development Goals are intertwined, and they discuss pertinent matters on the agendas and how to move the agendas forward. And the Biden administration has dedicated billions of dollars for all the African countries, which will be solicited until 25. And it will be a very nice session, and food security is also at the center of the discussion due to the Ukraine-Russia war, and they will raise this, and they will look into solutions for supplying food to the most affected people in the continent. And I hope things will be better, and we will have a news about today's session in our evening at 3.
Hopefully so. Thank you very much, Daniel, for hooking us up with the brief illustration of what's been trending.
Thank you.
Hello dear viewers, now I'm preparing to host the news package of the day. Before I head to the studio and present myself to the audience, I have to look presentable.
Hello dear viewers, I'm Tabitha John and this is Addis News Hour. Do stay with us.
Police in Omo Zone of the Southern Nations Nationalities and Peoples region of Ethiopia have intercepted 6,150 kilograms of narcotics concealed in packages of gypsum powder and loaded on a truck en route to Kenya. The truck loaded with the drug has been intercepted while crossing the Braille town in Benatsamai district of Omo Zone. The seizure was made with support of close inspection carried out by special forces of the Southern Nations Nationalities and Peoples region. A man suspected of smuggling the drug is said to have escaped, while the driver, the aide accomplice, was arrested. Police said investigations are underway. President Sahle-Work Zewde urged African women to be the forefront of the continent's peace-building process. Addressing the third African Women's Peace and Security Forum here the previous day, the president underlined that African women should strive for the peace of the continent by working together. Johannes Fontan has the following account.
The third African Women's Peace and Security Forum kicked off in the premises of the African Union Commission. This forum is organized by the Special Envoy for Women's Peace and Security of the African Union Commission and is being held under the leadership of the Ethiopian president. It aims to increase the role of African women in the peace and security of the continent. Sahle-Work said the role of African women remains pivotal in the sustenance of peace.
Our demands and actions are for women to have their place in these peace processes, mediation, negotiations, and implementation. Without their perspective, we cannot expect a lasting peace.
The president further underscored that African women leaders like Ellen Johnson Sirleaf have tried to elevate their country despite countless difficulties. According to Sahle-Work, President Sirleaf is an example for African women, and younger African women need to come forward using the shoulders of women leaders.
We are here because we rose on your shoulders. I rose on your shoulders. You have been the mentor, a very good example to follow. You have given us your shoulders. We are where we are today. I'm telling my sisters present here, you can also use mine for you to go to the upper level. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bineta Diop, Special Envoy for Women's Peace and Security of the African Union Commission, for her part said that although women are the prime victims of conflicts in Africa, the political process has reduced their role in negotiations and peace processes.
You all know that we still have conflict in Africa, ongoing conflict. But we know also that when conflict happens, the women play a role and should play a role. What we have seen is women are victims, but we don't want it to say women are only victims. They are survivors. They are the ones who always pick up the pieces. But when it comes to negotiation, we don't see them. So as a special envoy on women, peace and security, we said, let's make sure that African Union have the tools, some tools to measure commitment, because head of state are committed to say that when we have women at the table, and if they are not at the table, we should not have peace negotiation.
The two-day forum is expected to map out strategies to elevate the role of women in peace and security in Africa.
A historian expressed hopes that the truce signed in early November in Pretoria, South Africa between the government and the TPLF is bearing fruits. Talking to ETV here the previous day, a historian with the Addis Ababa University, Dachasa Bebe, lauded the initiative for being a vivid demonstration of African solutions to African problems. Gosha Meliso reports.
Ethiopia, a nation of antiquities and one of the influential states in the Horn of Africa, is finally breathing an air of peace. This is following the truce between the Ethiopian government and Tigray forces in early November, laying out the roadmap for implementation of a peace deal that both sides reached in South Africa this month. A recent encounter between the two groups in Shire, a town in north-central Tigray, has helped map out strategies for the disarmament of TPLF's combatants is a significant improvement in this regard. Talking to ETV, lecturer at Addis Ababa University, Dechasa Abebe said the peace agreement signed between the federal government and the TPLF has begun to bear fruits.
The overall destruction or whatever casualties I think came to an end because of the process, the peace process. Just from the very beginning, or from the first day to the present, we didn't hear any shoot or any whatever activities that took lives of a human being or other material destruction. So I think it is one fruit of the peace process.
Both sides said they were committed to the declaration, stressing it was the only way to restore peace and stability. They have also expressed resolve fully dedicate themselves into implementing the Pretoria Agreement and this declaration. Ethiopian military officials and TPLF had reached an agreement on the disarmament of TPLF fighters and entry of the Ethiopian military into the Tigray capital of Mekelle. The federal government said in a statement issued after the signing. Dechasa also underscored that the peace accord is a vivid demonstration of Africans solving their problems by their own.
We can say also Africa is becoming in a position to solve or look way for its problems by itself. I think as far as my understanding is concerned, things are carried out entirely by the Africans themselves. So we can say Africa is in a position to, is becoming in a position to solve its problem by itself.
The role of scholars, it was pointed out, remains critical. Dechasa said intellectuals should support the peace deal by sharing their knowledge and experiences to achieve its goal.
We can also share ideas from some of our historical experiences, how we used to solve our problems, African problems, Ethiopian problems. So lesson can be adopted from those historical experience. It is the intellectuals who had that knowledge or that experience from their readings. So intellectuals, as far as I know, can play multiple roles in shaping some of the processes.
The aftermath of the peace agreement is witnessing restoration of basic services in conflict-affected areas of Tigray and neighboring states of Amhara and Afar.
The 70th Global
It's expected that
Ethiopia is where Ethiopians
one of Africa's soul to Sanas.
Our news is always aired on Monday to Friday on 11 a.m. and 9 p.m. and also on Saturday and Sunday on 9 p.m. Make sure to follow us.
At least 100 people have been killed in flooding in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo. There have been landslides across the city of 15 million, destroying homes and roads. Dugusanisa has more from Al Jazeera.
The backbone of the Democratic Republic of Congo's highway system, the N1, cuts in two. Heavy rains across the capital, Kinshasa, have submerged entire neighborhoods. It is being described as some of the worst flooding to ever hit the city. A landslide slammed into this home in the city's Binza Delvaux district. 9 members of the same family were killed.
We went back to the house to sleep since we were soaked and cold. We went back to bed, and just after, the wall collapsed on the children and the parents and then a neighbor who was passing by. I find it hard to bear. I have no strength to bury the dead bodies.
Poor regulation and rapid urbanization have made Kinshasa increasingly vulnerable to flash floods, which have become more frequent due to climate change. Many homes have been poorly built on flood-prone slopes, and the city suffers from the inadequate drainage and sewerage.
I've been a widow since 2015, and now my house is gone with the rain. I can't find one of my children. I don't know where he is. I'm a poor woman who is managing, but I don't know where to go. I've lost almost everything, even my clothes.
The DRC's Prime Minister and the provincial governor have been visiting flooded areas around the city. They hope to reopen the Key in One highway in the next 4 days, but until it's repaired, the Capstone's main supply route is cut off.
Everyone passes here, the traders. Now we will suffer. More entries of goods or even fuel will not be able to arrive in Kinshasa.
In 2019, dozens of people were killed in similar flooding across Kinshasa. And as heavy rains become more frequent, many in the city of 15 million are left wondering when this will happen once again.
Española, con el chándal rojo, sonríe, sonrisa abierta. Sergio